Back in December of this year, Eric July made a very huge announcement. Eric July claimed he would be publishing at least 12 comic books this year, and that it would likely be more than that. Eric July frequently brags about not making late books, and publishing 12 books a year would demonstrate superior speed, at least compared to other indie publishers. And in this video, Shane Davis versus Eric July, quantity versus quality, we discuss whether or not Eric July will actually be able to make more of a profit by publishing books monthly. But today we're going to explore whether or not publishing this many books has actually harmed the quality of his material. Let's take a quick look at Eric July's post, which had spurred Shane Davis into making that initial video. Here Eric July explains that quality versus quantity is a false dichotomy. The quality bit is used as a response to the more productive people in comics. To distract from their own laziness and lack of professionalism, this isn't about quality versus quantity, it's about professionalism, drive, ambition, and work ethic. The unprofessional spends 5 years missing all deadlines producing 1 or 2 books. And this is how Shane Davis responded to Eric July.
It's the American comic book industry, and everybody's talking about it. What's wrong with it? With a million YouTube channels where there's thinking critical, Purge, Ethan Van Sciver, your boy Zach. What does it take to fix it? Okay, like we've all evaluated it. We've all checked the oil, the check engine lights on the fucking American comic book industry. We've all gotten our faces pushed in the mud by manga. But what does it take to fix it? Is it putting out monthly books? I don't know, because Marvel and DC hasn't stopped doing that for years and it's still going down. I don't think quantity is the answer. Now, somebody's going to say, but Shane, you could do both. Both have happened, and there's very few comic creators that can do both. I'll be honest with you. Brian Azzarello's only ever written X amount of books per month. Jeff Johns, the same. Some of these guys tap out at a certain point because their egos say, "What? Yeah, I could write an extra book a month at DC, but the reality is either my life's going to be hell or my quality is going to suffer. You're going to have to turn loose of something." And some guys are just like, their egos like, "No, my books are this quality no matter what." And I don't know, with all the buying options for any consumer right now, I feel like we have to make books that matter. I really do. I think we have to make quality books. Now, does that mean that one day I couldn't just flip off of YouTube and quit YouTube completely and I could stamp out like 8 crowdfunded books a year? Sure. But who's going to advertise it? Who's going to market it? Who's going to tell people and show people why they should care?
In the indie space, it sounds really impressive to say, hey, I just published 12 books in a year, but you compare that to Marvel and DC, and it's nothing. So if this is your main claim to fame, then is it really that special? Because Marvel and DC are constantly pumping out dozens and dozens of books. So who's right? Shane Davis or Eric July? Let's take a look at what happened to Eric shortly after he decided he would try to just churn out a dozen books this year.
What's up, y'all? It's Eric July with Rippaverse Comics, and I may have screwed up just a little bit. You know how things, they play out in your mind and you want to experiment, and then when you see it kind of come into fruition, doesn't quite look like you may have intended. This might have happened with Blood Ruth #1, which is shipping right now to all of you customers. Now, this scene I'm going to show you guys real quick. You first saw it with the original previews for Blood Ruth #1, I believe, when we first announced it. Now, how the Saskas did it, they originally planned for it to be this double page, like spread, like splash page or what have you. And I was looking at it, especially with the black and white, which I do believe it still plays out a little better than in the black and white than it does with the color. What if we go for this like more cinematic look? As if you can imagine sort of the camera like panning, right? You see one part of it and then you see the other side as it slowly pans, let's say from left to right or what have you. So you see this demon here, right? And he's doing what he does here. Now again, I'm thinking this is gonna play out cinematically. It's gonna look real cool because the next page, you get the full reveal, right? But it's still of the same scene. And after looking at it, especially the color version of it, I'm like, I don't know if it may have landed the way that I thought. I don't know, maybe some of you like it. Of course, let me know once you do get your books, but I wanted to just let you know, look, that's on me. I was experimenting, maybe it didn't land that well. Nonetheless, I appreciate you guys so much for being customers of the Rippaverse, and please do your reviews for Blood Ruth #1 as soon as you read through this lovely book by Jenna Sylvia Saska as well as Michael Montanat.
Just a couple of months after claiming there's a false dichotomy between quality versus quantity, Eric July ended up just making one of the biggest blunders you could make. He mutilated his comic book by destroying a double-page spread, and instead of having this really powerful image so that way it could be visibly seen, he separated it into 2 separate pages. And rather than reprinting these books which he had botched up, he decided he'd send them out anyway, making this video before he had even started shipping. And while Eric July claims there's a false dichotomy between quantity and quality, I don't think that's the case. Eric July didn't care that his book had been mutilated, that the artwork had been desecrated, that viewers weren't going to see what they were intended to. He sent out a broken book, recognizing it had an issue before shipping had even started. Eric could have owned up to this mistake. He recognized it before he'd even sent the books out. But rather than actually caring about the artwork as it was intended to be enjoyed, he decided to send out a subpar book, which was broken and damaged. And since he made this video claiming it was intentional, that he was trying to make a cinematic effect, he didn't have to issue out any refunds either. And as I mentioned in a previous video, Comic Artist versus Con Artist, Dan Lawless versus Eric July, we look at how Dan Lawless, an actual artist, was very upset when his book Star-Lord was printed in a way in which the colors weren't fully captured. This was something completely out of his hands, and yet he's still upset about it 28 years later. Whereas Eric July, on the other hand, will purposefully misprint a book, and he doesn't even have a second thought about it. This is a difference between quality and quantity. Someone who loves their book and someone who's just trying to make a buck. Now, a few months after Eric July's printing debacle, he ended up posting this quote. He said, "If you spent as much time working on your craft as you did complaining, well, you wouldn't have the time or energy to be worried about everybody else." Almost a decade later, it rings true. Now, Shane Davis came in swinging. He said, "Whatever Kraft claimed is worthless when you misprint the book and compound the issue by burning both the backer's book and shipping money to mail them a defective product." Here, Shane Davis is saying that Eric July has no leg to stand on because while he may have some quantity, he certainly doesn't have any quality. Then Eric July's #1 man, Sturgis, aka Renowned Zero, ended up responding to Shane Davis. And for those of you who don't know Sturgis, let me get you acquainted really quick.
There you go, Nips. There you go. Happy?
So yes, viewer, that is Sturgis, and Sturgis, this is my viewer. Now with these formalities out of the way, let's take a quick look at what Sturgis had to say. Here Sturgis says it wasn't a misprint. You keep using that word and you still don't know what that means. So here Renowned Zero is arguing that Eric July didn't accidentally misprint the book, but he did it on purpose. Then he went on to say that Blood Ruth was better than anything Shane Davis had ever created. Shane Davis shot back saying a broken spread's a misprint. Just like the mess Eric July's made, sorry his Rippaverse crashed into your world, grab a lifeboat, ditch the Rippa Titanic, someone somewhere might care about you, maybe, if they're desperate. Cheers, 9 Live Comics. Clearly, Shane Davis doesn't know much about Sturgis. There are a ton of people who care about him because they're soliciting him for nitpicks on the internet. And how many people are asking Shane Davis to flash his nipples on camera? Renowned Zero went on to say that he doesn't buy products from smug a-holes who accuse him of trying to get them sued by Sega. He then went on to say, "I've already got more great comics coming from Mugen Lord, Von Coleman, and Tyler C. World." Now this is when Sturgis made a bit of an error. He shouldn't have assumed that he could just randomly drag in all of these comic book creators into this internet slap fight. As it turns out, Mugen Lord, like Eric July, had a misprint on one of his covers. But unlike Eric, Mugen Lord decided to fork over some cash and try and fix the issue. This cost him greatly, especially with international shipping. And this is what Mugen Lord said in closing about Eric July's misprint. "This was just my insight on what was really going on with the process. I believe Eric really screwed up and didn't want to take the hit on reprinting those books, and instead shipped them out that way and claimed it was a creative choice that didn't pan out right. This is not hating, this is fair skepticism, and this is from someone who bought Yaira, Gooding, and Horseman." And this is how Eric July responded. He said, "I didn't realize this was still a topic of discussion. Since I've also supported your work, I want to respond respectively, because it feels like the criticism here was less about genuine concern and more about elevating your own stance." Now the funny part here is how Eric is saying, "I didn't realize this was still a topic of discussion," as if he can magically claim that this massive blunder is suddenly now no longer relevant. You're no longer allowed to talk about my blunder. Think about how he's still hounding people like Max Visaggio or Heather Antos, even though most of those people aren't really relevant anymore. Can Heather Antos say, "Hey, stop making fun of me"? You're not in a place to negotiate. If you do something really stupid, something that reveals your true colors, then yeah, people aren't going to just throw it away, pretend it never happened. You don't get to decide if people remember your blunders or not. That's on them. Now, the second part here where he says that it feels like the criticism was less about genuine concern and more about elevating your own stance. He's saying that Mugen Lord is being a bad faith actor. He doesn't actually really believe he's saying what he's saying. He's just trying to virtue signal. And then in this next paragraph, he says, your assumption isn't just incorrect, it doesn't hold up logically. We've acknowledged past issues openly and have issued reprints when appropriate, for both books and merch. So if the implication is that we were unwilling to do so here, you'd have to explain why we never hesitated before, but supposedly would now. And this part really made me laugh. I mean, this is the first campaign of Eric's where every single book had a botched double-page spread, so there isn't anything to compare this to. Though it wouldn't be the last, which is something we're going to be getting into in a second here. So as to why Eric July didn't remediate this issue, there are plenty of things I could think of. The most charitable answer would be that he actually was the one who ended up making this printing issue. He'd sent the pages incorrectly to the printer, and since this was his error and not the fault of the printer, they wouldn't give him a refund. And out of mostly laziness and also just a little bit of a penny-pinching attitude, he decided it would be too much of a headache to fix it, and he just claimed that he had purposely made this mistake, which is sort of true, as it wasn't the printer's fault that it had been botched, but he wanted to make it sound like it was very intentional, like he was actually trying to do it for artistic reasons, probably aware that people would use this as an example to say Eric July doesn't care about art, he doesn't really care about the things that he's printing. So to try and snuff out such criticism, and also avoid having to reprint it, he claimed that this was an artistic choice. Then in the third paragraph, he goes on to say, in this case, it wasn't an oversight, it was an intentional creative decision. The writers involved are also directors, so approaching it that way, it shouldn't be surprising. Ultimately, as stated before, the book even shipped. The final call was mine. If you disagree with the choice, that's perfectly fair, but questioning our integrity over the decision is unnecessary. Now, the funniest part about this is how he's trying to say, this was all on purpose. I purposefully misprinted the book. So this isn't just because I have an issue with attention to detail and something went over my head, but I'm actually retarded. I'm so stupid that I don't know how to actually make a book. That's the defense that Eric July is trying to make for himself here. Then he went on to say the writers involved are also directors, so approaching it that way it shouldn't be surprising. Now, this is what's really confusing to me. Earlier, Eric July claimed it was his fault that the book was misprinted.
I may have screwed up just a little bit.
But now it sounds like he's pinning the blame on the satanic incestuous vomit pornographers, who he's hired to be the editors-in-chief of his publishing company. So whose fault is it? The incest twins or his fault? I'm still not sure. Now let's go back to the first paragraph. So here he's trying to say that he supported Mugen Lord in the past. This whole interaction seems slimy to me. It kind of reminds me of how he treated Aaron, Immortal Rising, and B.A. Turner back in New Year's of 2024. I covered that in a separate video. Of course, if you're interested, make sure to stick to the end so you can see it. So here Eric's trying to guilt trip him by saying, I helped you, you're being disloyal. And he's also saying, why is this still a topic of discussion? I don't want you to talk about this, so why are you still talking about it? And let me show you why we're still talking about this. Just take a look at what happened with Eric July's recent book, Zaylin, What Kills Must Die.
What's up, y'all? Eric July here with Rippaverse Publishing, and I want to talk to you directly about Zaylin, What Kills Must Die by Chuck Dixon and Joe Bennett, which began shipping last week. Unfortunately, there's a printing and binding issue that affects every copy of the current print run. If you take a close look at the book, you'll notice some pages are misaligned. This wasn't a simple misprint. It was caused by a fundamental layout issue. In some instances, the end of one page appears again at the start of the next. This becomes especially obvious during certain double page spreads. As you can see right here, down there, his belt is repeating. To be completely transparent, our art directors actually caught this during the proofing stage. The problem was raised before full production. However, we were assured by our pre-press team that it wouldn't be an issue. That was incorrect. So not only did pre-press give us a green light, but the printer didn't catch the problem during all phases, even in binding. Ultimately though, the responsibility is ours either way. This level of quality is unacceptable, and as a company we're owning up to that. We've done several books with spreads before and they've turned out just fine. You can look at our past releases as proof of that, such as this scene right here in Yaira, this scene right here that's in the Horseman book, and even in our first bit of collected works, you can see it right here, the Alpha Core pages in the Trinity Volume 1.
Hey Eric, are you going to show us Blood Ruth? How did that double page spread come out? So here Eric is saying that he'll either A, give you a 60% discount on your next order, so hey, buy more product, or if you ship it to me, then I'll give you your book back. Then you had this guy on Twitter saying, you know what's not serious? Rip-reverse accountability. Imagine someone effing up something, then charging customers for replacement for one's F-up. Eric July went on to say, I'm not sure where this information is coming from, but it's false. Our return process has never worked like this, as we will fund shipping in addition to issuing refunds. Additionally, the 60% of the next order applies to all Zaylin customers regardless of refund status. Yanzi Lin, the consort of Shane Davis, gave this cutting response. She said in quotes, our return process has never worked like this, then highlighted his return policy which said you will be responsible for paying for your own shipping costs by returning your items. Shipping costs are non-refundable. Eric July claims that he has a different policy for books which were mishandled on his part, but that wasn't clarified in the video. So what do you think? Is there a false dichotomy between quantity and quality? Do you think that Shane Davis is right, that quality is most important? Or do you side with Eric July and think it's okay to send your customers subpar books? Let me know what you think in the comments section, and as always, don't forget to like and subscribe, or
You are a hoe ass